So hello everyone and welcome to the fourth video in the series on solo Disney World trips. Today we're going to discuss solo Disney World shame. If you're interested in other videos about my adventures across reading, watching, playing and travelling, then don't hesitate to like this video and subscribe. Certainly consider posting a comment because interaction with my subscribers and watchers is one of the best things about this endeavour. Okay, so what is solo Disney World trip shame? Well, this video actually wasn't in the list of videos to do for this series, but was inspired by a comment from a subscriber about a previous video. I've put that comment in below, and basically she was asking, how do you deal with the fact that a lot of people are negative about the fact you're going on a solo Disney World trip? And that is a very good question, because many people think that Disney World is only for children, and if they don't think it's only for children, they certainly think it's for couples and families. They certainly don't think going on your own is a sensible thing to do, which means you generally get the feeling from other people that you should be shameful of your trip, embarrassed about your trip. It's not exactly the same as that moment in Game of Thrones where Cersei needs to walk through the streets of Knots Landing naked, having insults thrown at her and being pelted with rotten fruit. But it can sometimes almost feel like that, to the point that it can put your solo Disney World trip in danger. So how do you deal with that possible torrent of negativity that is maybe going to put your decision at risk? I think you have to deal with it over the phases of the journey you're going to take. And that journey consists of 3 phases. How you deal with it pre-trip, how you deal with it during your trip, and how you deal with it after the trip. Because all 3 of these are very different circumstances and have their own unique challenges. Pre-trip is when you're at risk the most from negativity. They can feel quite cutting, they can go straight to the heart of the matter and really persuade you that you shouldn't go on your solo Disney World trip. It's quite obvious why this is the case. You're potentially the least confident about your decision at this point, especially in the earlier phases. A really cutting comment, even if not really intended that way, can really set you back if it comes at the particularly wrong time. A big part of the solution during the pre-trip period is to remember one key thing. You owe no one an explanation about your solo Disney World trip. You don't have to tell anyone till you want to. You have the right to keep it a complete secret if you want to, right up until the point you fly, though that would have some complexities. I managed it this way. I kept the decision to myself while I needed to. I then opened up the fact I was thinking about it to people I trusted, who I knew I could have a conversation with, who would enrich my decision of whether I should do it or not, rather than just diss my decision of whether I should do it or not. So people who would help me get to whether it was a good idea. That tended to be family members. I didn't really tell anyone else. The key point at this stage is to only open up about your Disney World solo trip to people who can help you make a good decision. If people are effectively only going to browbeat you into not doing it, either on purpose or not, just avoid the conversations with those people. You owe no one an explanation. Obviously, that's not always possible. Sometimes people find out. You have to tell people you're going on holiday at work. You might not want to lie about where you're going. So people will find out who you'd rather not find out, or who you're ambivalent about finding out, and occasionally they will come back with the negativity. The way I handled that was just to politely close down conversations. I would just state what I'm doing as fact, not necessarily in a way that entertained the idea that I wanted a follow-up conversation, and just left it at that. Because as I will discuss at the end of this video, there is a type of person that it is just not worth having that discussion with. Now we come back to dealing with the shame or embarrassment or negativity during your actual trip. Now what is fascinating about that is that went a totally different way than I thought. I thought when I went on my solo Disney World trip, what would happen is I would be faced with 1,001 micro moments that set me back in my journey. You know, little encounters, little interactions, little things I had to get through that just reminded me I was on a solo trip and would chip away at my solo Disney World trip confidence. Actually, that never happened. As I've said numerous times across numerous videos, the key thing I took away from my solo Disney World trip, actually while I was theirs, no one cares. Everything was easy, smooth, interactions with people weren't awkward. It was absolutely brilliant. So while I cannot say your Disney World solo trip will be exactly the same, my experience was, if you're worried about the solo Disney World experience and little moments of frustration getting in the way of that while you're there, that didn't occur when I was there. My problem was slightly different, in the sense it wasn't a series of micro moments, it was one big challenge. But at least it occurred on the moment I arrived, and I'd got over it by the first full day in Disney World. The moment I suffered, I think, also exemplifies how the difficulties you might face, and I say might, depend very much on things like your age, sex, where you're from. I know that's a terrible thing to say, but I think it's probably true. So my moment of difficulty was when I first arrived, in that customs were presented with a man in his mid-40s who was travelling to Florida on his own, saying he was going to spend 2 weeks at Disney World solo. They did not believe that for a second. I don't think they thought I was a terrorist or about to do anything dangerous, but I certainly think they thought I was maybe a professional person trying to sneak some work in under the radar or something like that. They really put me through the ringer. I think in retrospect, I would have dealt with that questioning better if the questions weren't the exact questions that cut straight to the heart of my confidence of going on a solo Disney World trip, which meant it probably felt worse than it was. But two people certainly put me through the ringer, even getting me to check Facebook and things like that to prove that I was actually going to return home. It got a bit crazy. But no, it really hit hard. It sort of really hit the first day as my day of arrival very, very hard. It was really difficult. It didn't help that when I went into the Magic Kingdom on an evening, it was dark, it was raining, it was a bit depressing, and then a guest mistook me for a cast member, because of course only a cast member would be walking around the Magic Kingdom on its own. So therefore that was one of those micro moments I was expecting, and it's safe to say I was really set back a big way in my day of arrival. But I woke up on my first full day, resolved to make the most of it. I was there, I had 14 days to go, and from then on it was blissful. Also keep in mind my advice earlier, you owe no one an explanation. So while I had no problem with any interactions in Disney World because of my solo status, there was 2 occasions where I just felt, you know what, I don't want to entertain a potential conversation here about my solo status, even though there was probably a low chance it would actually happen. This meant when I took my trip to NASA and the driver asked about me being on my own, I just said I was the only one in my party who wanted to come. Also, when I went on a jet ski tour, I got a similar question and I just said the rest of my party are in the Magic Kingdom. Remember, if it makes it slightly easier for you, you owe no one an explanation. What can I say about the post-trip phase, other than it is absolutely fantastic? But let's assume you enjoyed your solo Disney World trip, because I did, so obviously I think you will, and you found that it is a very life-enriching experience, because that's what I found. It was beyond just a holiday. It came at a very difficult time in my life, it really helped, and it was life-enriching. The great thing about the phase after you've been on your trip is you basically give the metaphorical middle finger to anyone who has any negativity about it. Because at this point, you don't care who thinks it was a crazy idea, because you have your personal experience to go back on, and you know they're wrong by a mile. You've walked the difficult road of a solo Disney World trip, you've come out the other side, and I would say you will feel a better, more enriched person for it, and therefore any negativity just bounces off. Up until now I've been concentrating on how you deal with it, but now I want to say something about other people. There will always be people in your life who, let's be honest, are a bit banal and mundane rather than imaginative. They watch films and just take everything literally at the most simplest level. They completely lose the plot when they're left with their own thoughts because they can't exist in their own imagination. They can't imagine a theme park without looking at it through the eyes of their children, because what their children have they've lost. While not true of all people, you will be surrounded at any time by people with, let's admit it, a scarcity of imagination. And remember, you owe no one an explanation. If you're considering a solo Disney World trip, or you've been on one, how did you manage the communication with people in order to stop the negativity affecting your decision too much? I'd be interested in knowing in the comments, especially how you managed it pre-trip, during trip and after trip. Thank you for listening. Please consider liking and subscribing. Until next time.